So, welcome everyone to Family Connect Network. Today, the psychotherapist Anthea will be exposing different traumas, inner wounds, and hurt that is breaking down individuals, families, and our societies today. And we say it is time for inner healing. Welcome, Anthea. It's so wonderful to have you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking me to come along and talk with you.
Thank you so much. Can we meet with you, please?
Yeah. So, I'm a psychotherapist, as you've said, and I'm also a group analyst, which just basically means I do therapy with people in groups, community working with children, with families, parents, and group work who are dealing with trauma. So things that have gone on that have been significant and impactful, dealing with loss, break down in communications, address those difficulties and find a way to move forward in a more healing way.
Anthea, I must confess that you're doing a great work. Here in Family Connect, we have been addressing different issues in family.
Right.
But when we talk of traumas, racial trauma, can you take us through?
When people are treated differently or discriminated against because they are different, and so in we're thinking about racism, because you happen to be a different race, has profound impacts emotionally, psychologically, and actually we need to tend to that. It isn't just about something that happens between certain people who are discriminatory, but it's something that's embedded across our systems. So that's very important in terms of how that impacts people accessing services, whether that's accessing medical support, whether that means accessing education, that's accessing support such as the police services. That links, if you like, into intergenerational trauma. Particularly in therapy, a lot of the difficulties that people experience in the here and now are not always about what's happened in our lifetime, but actually things that have happened to our kind of ancestors a number of generations before. If they haven't had the luxury, because I guess having space to stop to heal is like a luxury, then it means it's unresolved. And a bit like, we know about genetic illnesses, we know that if a parent has a genetic illness, they can pass it on to their children and it becomes a kind of biological vulnerability that they have. It's the same with intergenerational trauma. So they sometimes call it epigenetics. And the idea is that actually a vulnerability in terms of a psychological and emotional wound that hasn't been resolved can be passed down generation to generation and can be like an emotional, psychological vulnerability. It's kind of this nature-nurture debate that they can come in with a vulnerability, but if they've had the right environment and they've had the right kind of support, that may not show up as a significant vulnerability. But if they come in and they have a number of stresses in their lives, then that's likely to be more of a significant vulnerability. And a similar kind of thing could be seen, if you like, in terms of experiences, for example, of slavery. That the experience of the oppression and the cruelty and the violence that happened then, there was no time and space to really process and address those traumas. And so intergenerationally that's been passed on. If someone has had this experience of migration where they've had to learn to be strong and take care of themselves and make sure that everything is right and they don't get into trouble of any kind, they may well internalize that attitude that they pass on to their children, which is that they can't be vulnerable, that they need to be strong all the time, that they always have to be focus on education, for example. And what can break down in that process is actually the child is from a different generation. So there's a generational piece here where actually they may desire more of a connection with the parent. They might want to know them more. They want to have more time with them. They might need to feel validated and appreciated and to know that they're loved and liked for who they are. And the parent, because of their experience growing up, that's not something that they necessarily had. They don't understand why that child wants that from them and can sometimes dismiss, minimize, because they just think, why do you need to do that? You just need to be strong. And something can be missed in that because actually the child has a different context and so they have a different need emotionally, psychologically to flourish and develop. And so they can be a kind of mismatch in terms of the cultures. And that can lead to a breakdown of communication. That's one example of what can happen. And the stereotype around men can't be sad, men can't be vulnerable, that they have to be strong. and that is a stereotypical message that needs to be changed. I know there's lots of work in different places where they're trying to challenge the cultural norms around this idea that it's not okay for young men or women to have vulnerability and to find things hard in the world, and depression in particular. There's a lot of stigma around that it's not okay and that it's a sign of weakness. So, absolutely, if any young people are presenting, they're struggling or feeling depressed, it's really important that we hear that. It's really important that that's taken seriously, and it's really important that, as well as getting support, that might be some psychotherapy, that might be maybe going to the GP and getting some additional support, and maybe medical intervention. It really depends on what the needs of the young person is at that time. Most importantly, it's really important that the people who love that young person take them seriously, support them, listen to them, and really try to find a way forward together, rather than for them to be made to feel that they're wrong for feeling how they feel.
Going through the process of that inner healing.
Well, one of the things that I find very helpful in terms of the research that's out there around family dynamics is that what we often, particularly for parenting, we often parent in the way that we were parented, even if we didn't feel it was adequate, even if we felt there are things about it that didn't really help us to really flourish. We tend to do the same thing with all the best intentions in the world. And the best way of making sure that we can do something different is for us to making sure that we have time to heal and address the places where we felt hurt or wounded, because parenting isn't there's no manual. Everyone does the best they can, and it's not about demonizing parents. It's about acknowledging the things that you would like to do better for your children as a parent. And often there isn't enough time to really reflect on that and to find a way to kind of really do something different, pass on a different experience to children. So part of the healing is about being able to reflect on what we have experienced as parents, and being able to work out how we can do something different, give something different to our children so that they have a more positive experience. And even if you had, pretty good parenting, there'll always be something that you can improve on, so that we're allowing something different to be offered to young people. The other thing is about communicating, that really making a platform. There's that kind of saying, is that the family that eats together stays together. And the whole thing about eating together is that you can talk about what's going on, how are you feeling, what are your thoughts about this, that we can create open platforms for there to be really open communication, so you can detect if things are going wrong, so you can really support each other and stuff. And I think that needs to be modelled by parents as well.
Thank you so much, Anthea. You're a great blessing today. Thank you.